Good morning, friends. It's Heather at Bush Poppy Farm. It's a chilly morning because we're in winter, but it is time for blackberry pruning. Welcome to the jungle. Not the concrete jungle. This is the crazy overgrown blackberry jungle. What I have here are triple crown thornless blackberries, and I love them. They produce really beautiful, lovely, juicy, tasty fruit, and they're thornless, which is such a bonus when it comes to harvesting, to pruning, just general care. It's so great. Now, we do have lots of wild blackberries that encroach into the garden. They actually live in the creek bed down here, and they are super thorny. So I do cut those out when I find them. But today we are going to be focusing on pruning this mess. Now we have a lot. We have 3 blackberries here, and then I think there's 3 more down there. Those are much younger plants. These have been here for a few years. Triple crown thornless blackberries are a floricane type blackberry, meaning they produce their fruit on second year wood. So the first year, the canes that come up are called primicanes, and then in their second year of growth, they become floricanes, producing flowers and then fruit. So most of the major growth you see here are floricanes, meaning they were produced last year and they will give me fruit this year. So my job now is to get rid of the primicane, or get rid of the floricanes that were last year that produced fruit. And you can tell the difference by, number one, them looking like old wood, dried up, and because after they produce fruit, they never produce again. So you really need to prune those out at the ground level. The other thing they will do, and I'm holding a piece right here, because I let these go, I normally don't prune until late winter, but this year these canes went crazy. This year will be a floricane. Last year it was a primicane, and they have roots that if any part of this plant touches the ground, it will produce roots and root in. So it has created 2 new plants for me, which I probably will plant somewhere on a trellis. And basically here, we just use our fence as the trellis because it's easy to weave things in and out. So if we look at the base of one of these plants, what we are looking for is the canes that have these spent flower and fruit stems on them, and we're going to remove those completely from the ground, from the plant. Now this right here, which is trying to root in, I know that this is a cane that grew for the first time last year. It will be a floricane this year, and the way I know that is, it's just one long stem. There are no lateral branches on it. So everywhere that you see a leaf right here, you see this is an axial bud. That will produce a side branch, a lateral, that will then carry fruit. Okay, so we're going to come along, and every cane that we find that has previously produced fruit, and it has laterals on it and traces of fruit, like this one right here, needs to come off and get completely cut away. So it's a fun job, but it's a big job, and it's going to take some time because I've got to trace these back to the base. In some cases, I'll have to use loppers to get them off. Once we get all of the last year's canes off, then we'll deal with this year's canes, which are huge. So we're gonna have a few options there. I generally will weave them in to the trellis to a point where they start to encroach on the next plant, and then I'll cut them back. Yes, that cuts away some of the ability for lateral shoots on those stems, and then cutting away some of the flowering capabilities, but otherwise they tend to get too roped up together when you have these really, really long canes. And that introduces a possibility for disease because there's no airflow there. So I'd rather keep this year's floricanes a little short. They can produce lots of laterals. And because I had fungus in the garden last year, I'm going to spray down everything once we get everything pruned up. So I'm going to start with this one, and we'll keep working our way down. I think that these two right here are the biggest ones. This one down here doesn't have as many canes on it, so it's a little bit easier. This is a fig that needs to go in the ground. But then we also have asparagus that I need to prune back completely because it will start sending up shoots soon. A whole bunch of stuff going on in here. We also have blueberries that need to be pruned, which I'm planning to do today as well. And I don't know that I'm going to touch this pomegranate or not yet, or the grape that's behind it. We'll see. Well, that's a first. So very interesting. This has never happened before. So I was able to cut off the last year's canes that produce fruit. The remaining canes put laterals on last season. So I'll show you what I'm talking about. This cane did not bear fruit last year, but it's got lots of laterals, okay? I'm keeping them because I'm hoping that they will produce fruit. But you can see, like on this cane, that bud is dead. These are all dead. You know, they tried, but then they broke off. I'm thinking it's one of two things, or a couple things. It could be that as those buds broke, first of all, they shouldn't have broken last year, which was probably in the fall. We've had a very warm winter. We've had a couple of freezes, but nothing major. And so you can see this is still leafed out. I mean, I think the plant just hasn't gone dormant and it's continued to grow. So I'm hoping that we'll get some fruit on these laterals. But this is not what I expected to see. Normally you see a branch and it has a bunch of unbroken buds, and that's not what I'm seeing here. The ones that have these sticks here that got eaten off, so these were lateral branches that got eaten maybe by rats, or the fungal infection that it had killed those laterals off before they could actually get long and produce leaves. So, without knowing how this is going to go, I have a multi-pronged approach here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to treat everything with copper fungicide. pull away all of the leaf litter down here. This is from the falling leaves from all of these trees. But that mulch will harbor fungus. So I'm gonna pull all that away from these 3 plants. And because I have a bunch of plants that aerial rooted, I'm gonna go ahead and plant those in the middle here. Now the spacing is a lot closer than it should be, but if by some chance these guys don't produce fruit on these canes and they don't send up primocanes this year, then I can pull them out and I'll still have blackberries. So it's kind of a safety precaution. Okay, so I'm gonna get this cleaned up. I will plant these guys and I'll just have to keep an eye on them. But let's go check the other ones down there, the younger bushes, and see what that situation is. Okay, so here is one of them. I think I planted this last year even. And it was not staked because there wasn't anything really to stake. So this, which is aerial rooted, I can train this up the fence here and we'll see what happens. This did produce a little bit of fruit last year, and you can see this one's kind of like, yeah, here it is. So this cane will come out. So we'll just take out what there was that clearly is old wood. And I think I might be left with just this one cane for this year, which is fine. This is a brand new plant. But it too produced laterals. Okay, and then this guy obviously got a lot bigger than the other one. I will just go ahead and try to train, as much as I can without snapping them up along the fence. And then again, it did have some canes with fruit, and so I will cut those back. And this final guy back here, similar situation. So very interesting. I've literally never had that happen before. In the winter here, there's always, very clear distinction between the fruiting canes from last year and the new canes this year. They have no bud break. It's very clear. This is very strange. So maybe it's just because even into September, we had temperatures in the hundreds. It was very, very hot. And so maybe they just kept growing because they kept feeling like, oh, well, it's growing season. And that's why they put on so much lateral growth. I just hope that doesn't mean we're going to forfeit fruit this year. We'll see. I'll be sad about that, not just because I enjoy the berries, but these blackberry bushes, with the flowers that they produce, they provide a huge amount of food, nectar and pollen source for my bees that are right there. So not that they can't go somewhere else to get stuff, but it's really nice to be able to have forage for them right here next to their hive. So, okay, well, I know what I'm up against now, and I'll get this job started. Thankfully, the aerial ones, I will be able to plant, and they should take. It's not usually a problem. I mean, if you know about blackberries, they spread like weeds, and so this should not be a problem transplanting these guys. So I guess fingers crossed, and hopefully my work will pay off. Another thing I want to show you. See that? This is inside a birdie's bed. That is a rodent hole. And I found another one in my carrot bed. So they're coming up underneath the ground. Little jerks. Okay, so again, that means I have to set a ton of rodent traps out here, which I was planning to do anyway, to start annihilating the population before I start putting out all the great veggies that I just started sowing, because they won't eat the mustard, but I don't want to just grow a garden of mustard. I want to actually have produce that hasn't been eaten by rodents. So it's going to be off to the store later today to pick up a whole bunch more rat and mouse traps. It's like never ending. All right, I'm going to get started on this cleanup and replanting, and then we'll hope that this goes well, because I would really love to have blackberries this year. Well, that is not at all how I thought blackberry pruning was going to go this year. So only time will tell if the steps I've taken will be fruitful, literally. Okay, so you can see with this one, we're left with 2 canes. I probably pruned off a few canes that could have stayed, but because they all had laterals, it was very confusing. So these have 2 canes. They are really wrapped. I normally would have cut the flora cane short, but since we have so few canes this year, I left them long and I'm just weaving them into the fence. And then we planted one here and one here. And in the bottom of those holes, I put some fast start fertilizer, and then I got fresh soil, and I made sure I pulled all of the wood chips away, because the wood chips will tie up nitrogen and then the plant will suffer. So those are great for a mulch around the plant, but not like in the planting hole or right up next to the base of the plant. Okay, I also planted one right here, and then cut these guys back and wove them into the fence as well. So what I think is going to happen is we're not going to get any lateral shoots off this part of the branch, but that'll be okay. That just means the berries won't be as easy for rodents to get. And I try not to have too much stuff outside the fence on the outside when I'm weaving, because the deer hang out right there and they will eat all that stuff too. So I watered in the new ones. I pulled the mulch away from all the current ones, and then I sprayed everything with copper fungicide. Front and back sides of the leaves, the whole stems, and the ground around them. I might put another application of that later, in another week or so, because again, still no rain. So we'll see, because I want to make sure that these guys have every chance and don't have to battle fungus, because that would just suck. But at least I have new plants. If they survive, you know, if I have to pull out the old ones, then the new ones will be there to replace them. So at least it's a game plan. Okay, I'm actually starting to feel a little frustrated because everywhere I look, it's a mess, which is fine. Again, I keep telling myself it's only January, so lots and lots of cleanup to do out here. But first, this evening, when the sun starts to go down, I'm coming out to put out a whole bunch of brand new rat traps. Got to catch these guys because they're going to eat all my carrots. That was like the only bed that hadn't been touched. What I could have done, obviously, way back when I set up the birdies beds, is I could have put hardwood cloth on the bottom so they couldn't dig in from underneath. But I didn't, and I'm definitely not going to do that now, because getting those beds up with all that soil, and the bottom like third of those beds is cardboard. And so it would just be a disaster mess. So I will just set lots of traps and try to keep up on it and hope that I knock down the population enough that I can actually have a harvest in spring. So, okay guys, thanks for hanging out with me on this crazy wild ride of blackberry tending, which, like I said, totally unexpected, but who knows? And I'm not an expert at blackberries by any stretch, so maybe this is more normal than I think. It's just never happened to me. But you know, with the weather changing all the time and not being predictable anymore, we're probably just gonna have to get used to that and plan for contingencies. But I think in the future, I think this coming year, once they are done flowering and producing fruit, I'm gonna cut those canes out. Normally I would do that now, right, in like January. I'm going to do that at the end of their cycle. And then with the new canes, I'm going to go on and start weaving those in. I'm not going to save all this work until January, because if it starts to produce more laterals, then I can weave those in as well, and it won't be such a huge mess. Okay, thanks again, you guys, for hanging out. I hope you have a wonderful time in your garden, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.